Hi class, this is Joseph. Welcome to chapter 18. Today I'll do a mini lecture on Hobbes, Locke, and Berkeley. If you thought Berkeley, it's Berkeley. So we're going to talk about materialism and the beginnings of empiricism. So, as always, I've already expected that you've done the full reading because on these mini lectures I do not unpack everything. I'm going to go over some common threads and give you an overall picture of what's going on in the chapter. And then you can pick up the details in your reading and get through your quizzes. So let's look as a friendly reminder. So here we are in chapter 18. I give you pictures of Hobbes, Locke, and Berkeley. And then I got some good videos. So this will go over Locke and Berkeley and why they disagree on empiricism itself, because they're both empiricists. Then this one, Berkeley's idealism. This is teaching on this for more than 6 years now. When I come to these chapters, I get blown away every time I look at Berkeley. I think to myself, like, what in the world is going on? And I'll explain that more. But I just find it fascinating. But this is one of my favorite videos on YouTube that kind of gives you some visual representation of what's going on outside of me unpacking it for you. And I really love these two guys that put this together. And then we get political philosophy. So if you go into your modules, once again, you'll see that if you go into chapter 18, essentials from the reading, I think what I was telling you is, if I were you, I'd look at, these first, just to figure out, like, hey, what's expected of me? What are the essential points? Well, I know I got three people. I got Hobbes, I got Locke, and I got Berkeley coming down here. And it gives you kind of a snapshot of what each of them is trying to do. So you would have, already looked at this. But now let me give you kind of three threads going on through this reading, because there's a lot of information coming at you. Let me do this. Let me get out of here. It was an article that I had. Okay. So one is, pens. One is political philosophy. So here inside, so we're in chapter 18. So this is the first main thread that I'll pull out. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's in this order, but this is the thing I'll focus on. Political philosophy. And on this one, you're going to get Hobbes and Locke. And they're going to disagree with each other. Then you're going, sorry. Give me a second here. Then you're going to get what is it? The second main thread that I'll talk about is knowledge. How do we get knowledge? And on this one, it will be important to piggyback off what we just saw from Descartes in chapter 16. Descartes says we get it through pure reason. You might say reason and logic. Remember how I was talking about, that's like the philosopher's sixth sense. Like, we have five senses. How we navigate the world, and then Descartes will say, there's a sixth one, and it's pure reason. So if we're trying to get knowledge, how are we going to get it? Descartes gives us the vehicle of rationalism. And he's going to say, look, you get knowledge by reason alone. Remember those meditations when he doubted everything, and then he figured out, look, I can't doubt that I'm actually a thinking thing. He arrived there not by touch, sight, smell, sound. He arrived there by thinking about it, by using pure reason, right? So then Locke comes along, and he says, hey, we get it. We get knowledge by empiricism. Now, it turns out that Locke and Berkeley are both empiricists, but Berkeley denies the physical world. And this is why I love his argument. You're thinking, what in the world is going on? Well, he happens to deny the physical world. Does he do it willy-nilly? Does he come out and say, hey, I don't think this physical world exists? No. He does it by form of argument and reason, and he's very, very careful, and he's very methodical. So that's one of the things that blows me away about Berkeley. So he's going to disagree with Locke. So Locke, let's back up. So we got a sixth sense from Descartes, pure reason alone. Locke says, no, we're going to use the five senses, and we're going to navigate through the world with experience. We're going to experience the world. We're going to go out there with our eyes open, and we're going to, look at the world and take it all in. That's how we get knowledge. So right there, he disagrees with Descartes. Even though Descartes might say, yeah, we can experience the world as well. Like, of course we can. But he's going to say, fundamentally, we can doubt some of the things we experience because there's deception going on. Remember, that's what Descartes' fundamental problem was. And that's why he was skeptical that he could know anything. And that's why he doubted everything to arrive at that first thing he couldn't doubt. So he's going to say, yeah, I get you, Locke, but that's not going to be the fundamental way we get knowledge because we could be deceived. So anyways, that's where Locke and him depart. So Locke says, no, this is fundamental. Yeah, we can be deceived, like Descartes saying, but fundamentally, we're going to have these five senses. And you might say that empiricism, this is huge with the scientific method. This is how it's done. We're using the five senses. We're going out in reality and we're testing things. So you might say Descartes is more abstract, thinking through things, applying logic and reason. And you might say Locke is more hands-on. Berkeley says, yeah, I'm an empiricist, and I believe we can get knowledge this way. The only thing is this, these things that we're sensing, these senses that we have, we're sensing things, and they are very, very real. They're just not physical. So I keep on laughing because, like I said, I've been teaching this stuff for 6 years, and every time I come to Berkeley, I'm thinking, what? But when I read him, I'm kind of blown away. Like, how in the world do you just wake up and create these arguments where you deny the physical reality? You think it's all real, it's just not physical. Like, you can't touch it. Like, I'm knocking on this desk right now. I can feel it with my hands. He goes, oh, yeah. You're literally feeling a desk. You're literally, the desk is there. It's real. You're feeling it. It's just not physical. All right, so we're going to shift into this third distinction now, or this thread that I wanted to share with you, and it's this. It's metaphysics. More specifically, philosophy of mind. So on this one, we obviously have had Descartes that we just came from in chapter 16. Now we have Hobbes and Locke. Not a huge contributor here, but yes and no as far as substances. But let me just pick up. So Hobbes, Locke, and Berkeley. But in this one, you might say, not really going to focus on Locke as much, but Descartes we discussed. Now the debate will come between Hobbes and Berkeley. So we'll come back to that. So those are the three main threads going through the chapter. Metaphysics, specifically philosophy of mind, very specifically, just what in the hey are we? Like, I'm a human person, right? I have a physical body. I can touch it, right? So Descartes would say, yes, you do have a physical body and you have a soul which is non-physical. So there's two substances going on. That's substance dualism, right? Hobbes will say something like, hey, we have a physical body and we have this mental stuff, but the mental stuff doesn't have any causal powers over the physical. So he's like, he's going to really rely on the physical. And then you got Berkeley who's going to say, all we have is the non-physical, and the physical is an illusion. So you have three different views here of metaphysics and how they play out in philosophy of mind of, what are you as a human person? So now that I got those three up on the board, we'll start with Hobbes and Locke. So if you go to your reading right here, actually, yes, let me give you kind of a nutshell. When we think of politics, you might say, Hobbes will say, we as humans, basically, we lean towards evil. We're inherently evil. You leave us alone, dude, left to our own desires, we're going to do some really bad, stupid stuff. In general, that's how we are. Why? Because we're seeking pleasure and we're avoiding pain. And that means when we seek pleasure, we're selfish, totally selfish. So that's the way we are. And that's why we need a stronger form of control over your human nature. So yeah, here's the big thread in between Hobbes and Locke. When they're talking about politics, it's really about this. Fundamentally, what is human nature? Good or bad? Hobbes will say, yeah, hey man, it's kind of bad. Locke will say, well, it's inherently good. It could be bad. It could definitely be bad. But we're going to start off good. And this is where Locke would say something like tabula rasa. You start off with a blank slate. Have any of you heard that before? So you're born as a baby, right? And remember, Locke, he gets knowledge. We just discussed this briefly. He gets knowledge through experience. You experience the world and you get insight about the world and you get knowledge, right? What was knowledge? Like justified true belief. So you get that kind of stuff by using your five senses. You start off as a baby. You're inherently good. You can lean towards bad, but you don't start that way immediately. I mean, when you're born as a baby, you don't know what good and bad are. You're just like feeling around, crying, and then as you grow, you get more knowledge, more experience through the world, and then you can make good and bad choices. Hobbes would say you start off inherently evil. You literally are a selfish baby. You want this, you want that, you start crying. And it's kind of hilarious. If you don't have kids, just wait till you have kids. Then come back to what Hobbes and Locke said, and you tell me and the rest of the world, what do you think? Do you think we're inherently good or we're inherently bad, like we lean towards being super selfish? Me, as your professor, and you don't have to take my word for it, this is just my opinion now, I believe I'm with Hobbes. Oh yeah, we are definitely born totally selfish. Oh yeah, we're babies, but when we can think about sophistication, when we get a little bit older and we ask our parents for certain things, we get a little bit more cunning and we start manipulating. That's what happens. And our parents have to keep us in line and say, no. Don't steal from the store. Don't lie. Don't do this. Don't do that, because it's not good for you. It's not good for your character, right? So your parents start molding you. So that's just me. I'm with Hobbes here. But the central battle going on in this dialogue is political philosophy. Politics is all about power and power over you. So if you're a citizen of the United States, right, and you're thinking independent, Republican, Democrat, Green Party, whatever, right, it's all about how these candidates will use power over you. This is why they run for political office. They're saying, hey, I'm good with power. I'm fair. You should vote for me. And when you do vote for me, I will use my power to do these things, right? And then they have these platforms. This is mind-boggling to some of you that could care less about politics, right? It's because you don't actually know what it is. Once you figure out what it is and you say, hold on. You mean to tell me, Joseph, that politics is all about somebody having power over me? Yes, that's exactly what it is, right? So just think about your life right now in your local district. Where you live, your county. Are you in the county of Riverside? Like we're in Southern California. Are you in the county of San Diego, Orange County, LA County, Riverside, San Bernardino? Like what county are you in, right? What are your leaders within your county? Then you got the governor, right, that leads over a state. Then you got the president that leads over the country in all 50 states. So there's a level of power or level of politics over you. So you start getting interested in this and you're thinking, hold on. I don't want certain people to do certain things to me with this power they wield, so I'm going to vote. I'm going to vote for this candidate because I like how they want to use their power instead of this candidate. So if we fundamentally boil this down, this is what Hobbes and Locke are after. They're after a certain sort of political structure. And they've influenced the framers of the Constitution, by the way. So just to blow you away a little bit more, okay, remember that phrase, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Where do you think that comes from? Well, so if you look here, the Declaration of Independence, right? And Thomas Jefferson uses this. He's a main framer of this document. He borrows most of this from, or at least that phrase, from Locke in the Pursuit of Happiness. So you might say, this political philosophy or this debate on whether we're inherently good or we're inherently evil and how should we construct the governments to rule over us, Locke and Hobbes were struggling over that. And you might say the framers of the Constitution, like Thomas Jefferson, he was actually, and the other framers like Ben Franklin, all these other guys, they were borrowing from these two philosophers, Hobbes and Locke. So let's go back. So ultimately, let me give you a brief synopsis. And again, I don't cover all the details. I'm just giving you the bigger picture. What's going on in this chapter, right? And you could read these details on how they make their arguments. But for Hobbes, it's very simple. And I show this in my ethics class, but I'll show it to you here. This little clip. I want you to see an example. Have any of you read The Lord of the Flies? Most of us have in high school, right? If you forget what it was all about, a group of kids get stranded on an island and they have to survive. What happens? For those of you that read the book or even saw the movie, it's total chaos because there's a power struggle. Some kids are all about hunting and, spears and, they're all about using power over the weaker people. And the other people are like friendly and they want to get off the island and survive. And they want to have relationships that are, not manipulating and lying and taking people's life and lying, or I already said lying, but they want to lean towards more friendly, altruistic, everybody help each other. So there's a battle already, right? And what happens in the movie? So let me show you a scene. So this is the battle of politics, all right? Again, think about Hobbes. He's going to argue that people left to their own desires, lean towards bad. Like they're totally selfish, right? So Lord of the Flies picks up on this in a huge way. So let me play you the scene right here. If I can. Okay.
This is serious! Yeah, that is! Get away! Get out! All I'm saying is, if we don't get rescued, we might have to live here for a long time! Maybe the rest of our lives! We are stuck here until we get old! Now you can't go on acting like kids! We've got to be sensible and make things work! No!
My baby just got pranked! Filthy prank! You just got pranked! Filthy prank!
Okay, so that scene, that guy coming in, I wasn't really, you can YouTube that scene, Piggy's death. So I thought that there was, it was a longer scene. Basically, even though that last part of that guy coming in doesn't really matter to the argument, it's basically this. Piggy is on the side of like the good people, let's say. They're friendly, and he's holding a conch. And now earlier in the book, it's a symbol of authority. Like whenever somebody's holding that, they have a right to speak, even if you think they're crazy, right? You have to hear them out. You have to listen to them, right? So he's holding it. And he's saying, look, man, we got to get out this island. He's trying to be friendly. And what happens? Somebody kills him. He rolls a rock off the top of that cliff. And I'm sorry if that was graphic for some of you, but this is the point of me illustrating Hobbes. That is what's happening. Selfishness. They're maximizing power. They're huddling in their own group. And if you don't know about this book, you can read it or watch that movie. It's simply wonderful in the sense that it shows you about human nature. So The hunter group ends up killing him, and then there's some chaos, and I won't give away what happens at the end of the book. So Hobbes is going to use examples of the inherent selfish nature of people to justify, hey, we have to have this sort of government. And now let me go back to your little essentials for the reading. And he's going to say, you know, when we're selfish and we want pleasure, the state of nature is war. It just means, look, there's going to be complete anarchy and chaos. People are totally selfish. You're going to start killing each other off. So you're going to have to seek peace somehow. You're going to have a contract. Well, what kind of contract does that look like? He talks about, and you know, when you read Hobbes's original work, some of it's a little archaic. It's like I don't know. It's hard to understand him. No problem. He's still incredibly smart, right? But he might use English a certain way that you're not used to. What does he mean by establish a sovereign? Well, he wrote this article called Leviathan, or a book you might say, or whatever. Leviathan is a monster. If you look up Leviathan and you get pictures, you might go back to Greek mythology. You might say, that's not good. That's exactly his point. You have to have something that you don't actually like to govern you, to resist your selfish desires so that everybody can live and not kill each other off. So he's going to say, look, we need a little bit stronger form of government to battle the selfish desires that we have that can kill each other off. This is why we have rules. So he's going to say we need this because we lean towards inherent selfishness and, you know, badness or evil if left to our own desires. That's just as simple as that. So his political philosophy is all about, you need some sort of power structure and a contract where you say, look, all right, I will give up some of my freedoms because we all have to survive, and we'll create this sovereign and we'll agree to it that this government has control over us. Now, this is fascinating. So Locke will come and he'll disagree with the inherent nature of humans, and he'll say, yeah, we have to have a social contract. Yeah, we have to laws that govern us, but not so strong. So that's just where I'm going to leave it now. They're going to clash a little bit, but it's all about, like I said, power over your lives and how, how that should be played out. And let me just read to you a little snapshot, a little summary of Hobbes. And then I'll move on into the knowledge part. So Hobbes develops a moral and political theory based upon psychological egoism. He argues that we are all egoists who always act in our own self-interest and obtain gratification and avoid harm. However, we cannot obtain any of the basic goods because of the inherent fear and insecurity in an unregulated state of nature, in which life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. We cannot relax our guard because everyone is constantly in fear of everyone else. In the state of anarchy, the prudent person conducts that it really is in everyone's self-interest to make a contract to keep to a minimal morality of respecting human life, keeping covenants made, and obeying society's laws. This minimal morality, which Hobbes referred to as the laws of nature, is nothing more than a set of maxims of prudence to ensure that we all obey this covenant. Hobbes proposes a strong sovereign or Leviathan to impose severe penalties on those who disobey the laws, because covenants without the sword are but words. So what he means is, hey, you break the law, depending on what you've done, like if you kill somebody, rob somebody, there's going to be punishments coming at you. They're going to be strong so that everybody else realizes, hey, maybe I shouldn't do this, like a deterrent. You can actually think of the death penalty here. Should there be a death penalty, or should there not be a death penalty? According to Hobbes, yeah. You're going to have severe penalties on people who murder, or whatever you do to deserve the death penalty. So that's Hobbes in a nutshell. Let me read you a little bit of Locke, and then we'll move out of the political aspect. Locke sees a state of nature, meaning if we're left to ourselves, as an inferior state caused by the lack of adequate cooperation and common laws, but still as one in which our natural rights are enjoyed. Humans are not all egoistic or innately cruel, as Thomas Hobbes would make out. Government arises through a social contract in which individuals agree to be bound by the laws of central authority and respect the will of the majority. The will of the majority and natural rights to life, liberty, and the property limit the government. The government loses its legitimacy if it ceases to represent the will of the people and becomes tyrannical. In that case, revolution is warranted. So what's Locke basically arguing? Yeah, we need a government, but it has to be limited in its control in the sense that the citizens of a government have the right to overthrow it. So here we are talking about the United States, right? They have the right, or we have the right to overthrow our government when it becomes tyrannical, when it uses too much power. So there's a tension point that Locke puts on government that Hobbes doesn't. So that's where they would disagree. And if you want to get more interested in political philosophy, do some research on your own. But these are the tension points between these two, and I find them fascinating, especially as I get older. Like, I want to vote more on propositions and leaders, because I think, if somebody's corrupt and they say they'll do something and they don't do it, hey, I don't care what political platform they're running from, they're not to be trusted. Whether they're Democrat, Republican, Independent, Green Party, Libertarian, doesn't matter. If you say you're going to do something, maybe you should do it. And if you don't do it, maybe you shouldn't be voted in. So that's food for thought on the political philosophy aspect. And I think in this chapter, Hobbes and Locke mainly contribute to that. Knowledge, where do we get our knowledge? Descartes' sixth sense, Locke, empiricism, and I've already went over this briefly. And then Berkeley, yeah, he's an empiricist too, but things just aren't physical. Yes. And like I said, there's a wonderful video on that, crash course video. The guy that does that, he's awesome. Really entertaining stuff. You can look at that. Now I'm going to come to something that I love as well, metaphysics. And we already know Descartes, he's a substance dualist. Now I just want to briefly show you okay. We go to pins. Let me get out of there. Pins. I don't know what happened there. I don't exactly know what I did. Oh, okay. Here we go. Okay. So think about Descartes. If you're thinking about a substance, right? Think about Descartes as two. I don't know what in the world. Let's get out of there. Okay. Okay, so for Descartes, think of this as the physical. And think of this as the non-physical. You can use different words. You can use material. You can use immaterial. Same point, okay? One is made out of stuff that you can touch. The other one's not. So you might say, for Descartes, that's where the soul was, or the I. You just use a word referring to you, like who are you, like where are you located in this body kind of thing that we're using all the time, right? Our brain, central nervous system, and body. So Descartes will locate you, or the personal identity, and I'll even put this up there. Personal identity, one issue. Second one is, what am I made of? So Descartes will say, well, you're made of two things. Two substances, and this is just review, and it's going to help you when I move to Hobbes and Berkeley. He's going to say two things, physical and non-physical, okay? There's a union. It's a contingent union. It can be broke. What's that union I'm talking about? It's this, when the two things come together. This is where we get our bodily sensations, and if you were to pull these apart, you don't have the capacity to feel pain anymore. And by the way, just if you were to have read my near-death experience article, people that have out-of-body experiences or out-of-body with near-death experiences, they don't feel pain temporarily when they're dislocated for their body. Very fascinating stuff if Descartes' metaphysics holds. So anyways, two substances. You got one that's non-physical, one that's physical. Hobbes, so we have in this reading, he's a materialist, right? So you were to look in the beginning of your reading. Right here. So Hobbes, he's giving a shot at metaphysics. He's saying, look, we're made of material stuff. The entire life of the mind is nothing more than matter and motion. So whatever mind is, whatever you think it is, it's really just matter in motion. So it's reducible to matter. There ain't none of this stuff going on as far as what Descartes had over here, these two substances. Hobbes, it's real simple. He's going to say one. And the reason his is fascinating is because he's going to have another, and let me be fair to Descartes. Let me do a full circle representing two distinct substances. With Hobbes, he'll have one, and it will be physical or material, right? We got materialism. So material. And for Hobbes, in the reading, it talks about epiphenomenalism. You can look that up. What Hobbes is doing is this. He's saying all the mental life that you think you have, let's say this dotted circle here, he's going to say that's the mind or your mental activities, right? It's there, but it's not doing anything. What's doing something is this stuff right here. This physical stuff or this material stuff, it's causing things in your life. So for example, let me give you an example. Let's say right now you want to get up and go grab a drink, like out of Starbucks, right? What's causing you to get that drink? The thought life that you have, like, hey, I'm going to go get a drink now, and then your body starts moving? Or is it neurons firing in your brain causing your body to move? You think the whole time that you actually wanted a drink from Starbucks. Let's say you wanted to go and get a caramel macchiato. You know what I'm saying? I love those. Anyways, you think in your thought life, I want a caramel macchiato, and then your body just follows. For Hobbes, he's going to say, no. Neurons firing in your brain are causing you to want to get something to drink like a Starbucks. Your mental life that's riding along, it's just riding along the physical states. What's causing you to want to go do anything in your life is brain chemistry or neurons firing. That's it. And that's what he reduces your matter in motion. He reduces it to the material. It's just physical stuff. That's it. So you could have mental stuff, but it's not doing anything. Think about it another way. Let's say you're walking down the road and you have a shadow, right? We all have shadows, right? And let's say it's like behind you. Let's say the sun's in front of you and you're walking. The shadow behind you is not doing anything. It's taking a ride along your body, right? Your body's doing something and your shadow's riding along with you. That's how Hobbes thinks of your mental life. It's not causing anything to happen. What's causing things to happen is that, like I said, neurons firing or brain chemistry. So he's taking a shot at personal identity and what we're made of. Well, we're made of physical stuff. Personal identity, really just reducible to brain chemistry. So Locke will take this issue of, and I won't use him right now for the metaphysics of, what am I made of? We'll just say Locke says, yeah, you're definitely made of, physical stuff, and you definitely have mental stuff. Locke's going to say your personal identity is embedded inside your memories. Like basically, you are who you are because you have memories. Your conscious state of memories from the time you were born to the time you die, all that collective set of memories, that's who you are. That's where you get your personal identity. Like, I am who I am. Well, who am I? Well, shit, I don't know. I'm this person named Joseph who's such and such age years old. I'm this, height. I come from this family background. I was raised in this country or whatever. Traceable all the way back to when I had my memories. The only problem for Locke here is, what if you don't have memories anymore? What if you have bad memories, like you have Alzheimer's or frontal temporal dementia, and you can't remember things? Then what? Do you lose your personal identity? If I am who I am is based upon my memory and I lose all my memory, do I lose who I am? That's a problem that Locke will have to face. So that might be one of the tension points. But I still think he's on to something. There's something about our memories that makes us who we are. So hold that thought. There's also a movie called Memento, by the way. and it's about a guy who something about his short-term memory, and he can't remember his past. He can only remember, I think, 15 seconds into the past, so he writes all these flashcards. Anyways, look up Memento. It is awesome, and it's about this very thing, like your personal identity, who you are, and it's all embedded in his memory. So let's go to Berkeley now. Berkeley would say, yeah, there's a substance. There's one substance. It really is like the real deal. And this is the I, or your soul, or who am I? You are your soul. It is an immaterial thing. Now, in this reading, he's going to make arguments saying, he will piggyback off of Locke. And this is where we come to this point where I reminded you in your last video how Galileo talked about primary and secondary qualities. And I reminded you, like, if you were looking at, let's say, an apple, the primary qualities of the apple are inherent inside the apple, like the mass, the weight, the size, things like that. Those are in the apple. But if I talk to you about color and taste and texture, those are secondary qualities. Those can vary from person to person. So Locke takes this distinction of Galileo and he adds to it, and it's really fascinating. So Locke and Galileo, using this distinction, really help us understand why there's so much damn disagreement in the world, right? All kinds of disagreement over secondary properties. We can talk all day long about how good a caramel macchiato is versus a normal coffee versus water versus beer versus, like, we can go on and on and on. Then we can talk about these individual drinks and what they're made of. Exactly. Are they made from tea? Are they made from coffee? Are we using hot water? Are we using cold water? But then we can talk about taste. And that is a secondary quality versus the primary. And we could debate about it all day long. And that seems to be getting us somewhere else as far as where we get knowledge. We get knowledge through primary qualities about the things, not the secondary, even though a lot of the secondary qualities can help us with our knowledge. We might say, well, if we're giving this red apple to millions of people around the world and they're all getting kind of like the same taste, you might say that even though it's a secondary quality of taste that could differ from person to person, it seems to be trending that this thing is a sweet apple and not a unsweet apple, things like that. So I personally think that distinction of primary and secondary qualities that Locke uses is awesome, and Galileo, I think it's really cool. Now, Berkeley will come and say, Locke, really good, but here's the problem. Your primary qualities also are subjective. And he's going to walk you through some, thought experience of how that's the case. And he's going to say, you can't actually imagine an apple at all unless you're imagining its color and its taste and its texture. But Locke, you're telling us, you and Galileo are saying, look, you can imagine this apple having a certain mass and a certain weight and a certain whatever. And Berkeley's going to say, you can't really do that. You actually have to attribute these secondary qualities to it. But Locke is going to resist the secondary qualities, saying we could disagree over these. So in this chapter, I want you to understand, how does Berkeley do this? How does he separate, or how does he attack Locke's primary qualities and then end up rejecting the physical world? So that's a main thread of how they're getting knowledge and what Berkeley thinks he is. Now, here's the thing you're going to love. If you thought Berkeley was insane for rejecting the physical world, let me just remind you of one thing. A lot of you don't know this. There's Locke. Let me get to Berkeley here. So there's Berkeley. Okay, so the UC school system, how like we have UC Berkeley? It's actually named after this guy right here, Berkeley. It's just pronounced differently. So in actuality, it's really supposed to be called UC Berkeley, but it's called UC Berkeley. So if you think, or if you thought this guy is totally crazy, one of the greatest UC schools is named after him. So maybe he's not so crazy, but he's kind of crazy. You're thinking, what? Wait, I need the material world or the physical world to exist. If I get rid of this, things just don't work right. But here's what Berkeley's going to do. He's going to say, You were given these experiences by God. And here's the fascinating thing. Descartes, Locke, Berkeley, they all believed in God. Descartes says, I believe in God and I can get there through my sensations. God doesn't deceive me, things like that. Locke says, yeah, I can believe in God too, but we're going to use experience through the world, and we're going to use these primary and secondary qualities to help us with knowledge. And Berkeley is going to say, ultimately, both of those views are flawed because the physical world doesn't exist, and here's why. Because we can't even discuss what the hell's going on with the physical world itself. If Berkeley were to ask you, what's this desk made of? You might say wood. And they just say, well, what's that made of? And you might say atoms. And he says, what are those made of? And you might say neutrons, protons, or what is that? You can keep on going on and on and on and on until we're talking about something we don't even understand anymore, like superstring theory or antimatter and all kinds of stuff. And you're thinking, so if we can't actually disagree on what the desk is made of, and we can go into the smaller subatomic space and we're disagreeing there, Berkeley would say, quite simply, it doesn't exist in and of itself, but what exists is the idea of the desk. And who's giving you this idea? God. So for Berkeley, the existence of things consists in their being perceived. So the only way something could actually exist is if something's perceiving it. So I am perceiving my wife, and my wife is perceiving my son Kai, or we're perceiving each other, and that's how we exist, right? Here's the problem. What happens when we go to bed? When I go to bed, who's perceiving me? And if nobody's perceiving me, how can I exist? And Berkeley goes, oh, that's quite simple. God's perceiving us at all times, and that's how we exist. So in that video that I was recommending, these two do a wonderful job. Let me go back to where we were. Hashing out all the ins and outs of Berkeley's view and how that's different from the distinctions of Locke's primary and secondary qualities. And you can see that right here. And you can see it again here. So I would say, I highly recommend those videos. They're very entertaining. And that's just, basically for me to conclude this little mini lecture is just to give you the main threads going through. The first main thread was political philosophy. We're going to get dialogue between Hobbes and Locke. Then we're going to have knowledge. How do we actually get it? Or we're going to have a different view between Locke and Berkeley. And then metaphysics, specifically philosophy of mind. What are we made of? We're going to have Hobbes saying, look, we're materialist. Locke's going to say, we got some, material too. But he's going to say, yeah, we're made of material stuff like our human body. But we also have this thing called consciousness, and that's where we get our personal identity. But the main two players here with, what am I made of? Really Hobbes and Hobbes and Berkeley. Hobbes going to say just physical. Berkeley going to say, no, the physical actually doesn't exist. We're made of immaterial stuff. And so has anybody ever heard of this thought experiment? If a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? Anybody remember that? Well, here's the answer. It depends on who you're talking to. For Locke, it makes a sound when nobody's there because sound is just vibrations in the air, disturbance in the air. So it's definitely making a sound. Berkeley would say if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there, then it doesn't make a sound because nobody's perceiving the tree falling, and hence there's no tree falling. The tree falls, but there's no sound. Because for Berkeley, for the tree to exist is for us to perceive it. So this is fascinating. This is just the tip of the iceberg on these two with that tree falling doesn't make a sound. But so your answer now could be, well, it depends if you're Locke or Berkeley and their view on empiricism. So again, you can watch the videos and explore more, but yeah, that's pretty much it. The three main themes going through the chapter. Have fun with the videos, your quizzes, and then I will see you in chapter 19 coming up next, where we talk about David Hume. Alrighty. Reach out to me if you have any more questions, and it was a pleasure giving you this little mini lecture.